Okay, our subject today is situational awareness. And we really had a lot of folks sign up for this webinar. And I kind of question, why is that? Why is this a real popular subject? And I don't know exactly the answer, but it's something that is important to me. It's something that I try to think about all of the time, not just because I'm a risk manager and that's my job, but because this is life. This is how we avoid a lot of problems. This is how we stay safe. This is how we don't have car accidents. All of these things, we just memorialize it with a name. We call it situational awareness, and this is something that grew from the military, grew from aviation industry, where situational awareness is so important, because life and death is on the line every time when you're out there, whether you're on patrol in the military or up in an airplane. This situational awareness is essential to keeping us alive. Well, I believe it's the same with us each and every day as we're out walking around doing our job. If we're not aware, we can fall down a manhole. We can walk in front of a car. You name it. There's a lot of things. We could be accosted in the parking lot if we're walking along looking at a text message, and we walk into a bad situation. This is an essential thing to work on. Most of us have a fair sense of awareness, but I wonder, as I look at some of the claims that come in, I wonder how well we're actually doing all the way around. Some of the claims that I see come in are like, what? How did they what? Because it seems kind of crazy that somebody would have this type of an incident. Well, since I talked about these claims, I'll go and admit one of my failures on situational awareness. This happened just a few weeks ago. I was up in Heber City. I've been doing some work up there. Finished up with the morning, and I stopped at the Subway restaurant in Heber to get some lunch. And that's a pretty common thing for me when I'm out on the road. Between appointments, I'll grab lunch at a Subway. Why Subway? Well, I can at least feign that I'm eating a little healthier, even though it isn't. And it gives me a nice table that I can sit down and work on my computer versus working in the truck and doing email. So I'm sitting down at lunch. I've got my computer out. Sandwich is half eaten, and I'm just kind of browsing through email, responding to members' questions and various things, when a ruckus starts over at the line where people were ordering their sandwiches. And there are three gentlemen that are, I'd probably put them in the senior citizen category. I imagine they were in their 60s, maybe 70s, and there was a younger person there who started muttering some not so nice things to one of the older gentlemen. And I actually kind of chuckled to myself for a minute about what was happening there. And then suddenly it got serious. And the younger person involved in this altercation started shouting vulgarities and making threats to these three older gentlemen that were there. The staff at the restaurant, they jumped in and asked this person to leave, and then they told this person to leave, and suddenly I found myself in the midst, just a few feet away from a fairly serious altercation. Well, it all ended up well. The staff threw him a sandwich and told him to get out, and he did. And some of the staff had called 911 from the back room, and this guy was pulled over shortly after he pulled out of the parking lot and had a conversation with the officers, I guess. But I was left sitting there going, wow, I kind of failed on my situational awareness. I should have been taking some action as soon as things started going south. But I was doing some of the things. Okay, where's my exit route? I was pretty darn close to a problem happening, and my exit route was behind me and quite a distance behind me. And so how would I manage that? Anyway, it got me thinking about this because I knew I had this webinar coming up, and I had really a half a dozen other experiences that would kind of highlight what situational awareness is to me. Well, what are we going to talk about today? We want to talk about increasing all of our situational awareness through understanding what it is, identifying vulnerabilities that we may have, and then committing to situational awareness. That's probably the major point in any training is, what do we do? I don't think training's worth a ton if we don't do something different than we've done in the past after I get done with the training. If I just say, well, that was entertaining, or wow, I'm sure glad we got through that, and we go on and we don't make any changes, we probably haven't accomplished a lot in that training. So that would be my goal, that each of us would do something different today than we have in the past. And really, I would like to see everybody commit to look at their own situational awareness and do an evaluation and work on making it better. All right, so I've used this term a lot of times already, situational awareness. And you say, what the heck is that? I just signed up for this webinar because I wasn't quite sure what he was going to talk about. Well, I looked at a bunch of different definitions when preparing this material, and actually a lot of them were not very clear. They were kind of convoluted. A lot were really focused in the military and self-defense space, and didn't really make sense to what we're focusing on in our regular day-to-day events. And so I came up with my own definition. Maybe I just wanted to see my name on a definition in print there. But here's my definition of situational awareness. It is knowing your environment at every level and responding appropriately. That's kind of the overall thought is I need to recognize what's going on in my environment, figure out what that means to me, and then take appropriate action. It's a simple step, and we do this each and every day. We just may not have put a name to it and put a process in our mind. And that would be one of the goals that I would have, is that each of us make this an actual process that we follow each and every day. Let's talk just briefly about a couple of ways that our brain works. We have a built-in response to stress, to risks to us, and that's called fight or flight. Our brain responds when a grizzly bear walks out, when we're hiking in the woods. Our body's going to respond in our brain, and in turn our body is going to respond in one of two different ways. One is fight, or the other is flight. Flight means we're going to run away, and in most cases that's the better way to go, because that puts us at less risk. But maybe that grizzly bear jumps out and attacks us. Well, in that situation, I don't have the opportunity to flee away from the risk, so I'm going to fight. I'm forced to do that. Well, there are a lot of physiological and chemical factors that go along with fight or flight, and that's we have hormones, adrenaline, and various different things start pumping through our body that change how we react, and our heart rate increases, and all of these things happen in our body. Well, that's a very stressful situation. So this is a good reaction that we have, but we don't want to be doing it all the time, because in today's world, it's not a grizzly bear that we're facing. It's, I've got a report that's due, or I have my boss is mad at me, or I've got a major event happening, and I don't have enough time to get everything done. Well, our response to that, we can't run away or kill somebody, and so we deal with that stress. On the other end of these emotions is what we call the normalcy bias. The normalcy bias is the tendency of our brain to try to calculate what's going on around and make it something normal, something that we understand. And when I was sitting in subway, my brain's just calculating what's going on. I'm pretty used to sitting in a subway because I do that fairly often when I'm out on the road. And so my brain's trying to make this just normal. And these people are just not getting along. When suddenly that event turned to something that was very different. We have to, our brain is trying to cope with a lot of stimulus, a lot of different environmental information that's coming in. Anything from the weather, the amount of light, to my clothing on my skin. You may notice that you don't feel your clothing on your skin until you think about it, or you move a piece of clothing, and it's like, oh, I feel that there. Well, those nerves are always firing, but your brain says, forget about that. We got to focus on the important things. Our brain only has a certain amount of processing capability. And that can be a problem with us because if we put too many inputs, we may miss something that's really important. So when we talk about distracted driving, this is one of those big things. Distractions, even though they're minor, if there are multiple distractions, it may take away our cognitive ability to process what's going on ahead of us, and we may miss something as open and obvious as a pedestrian walking across the street because we've got so many things going on. So we're battling between the fight or flight and the normalcy bias, and situational awareness is a way that we manage all of this. That's the way to balance it, is to put a process in our brain called situational awareness to analyze, to gather information, analyze it, and decide what it means to us, and then take the appropriate action. Sometimes the appropriate action is nothing. Everything's good, but it gives us that feel of, hey, we're good. And that's a good way to go. All right. Here's another quick example. I told you I took the family to Canada. We went on a 3,000 mile trip last week. A long drive. Within this trip, we had a couple of border crossings. We went up into Canada, and just from an observation standpoint, from situational awareness, it was interesting. Any of you that have crossed a border, Doug went on a trip earlier in the year, and he went over some borders that were probably more exciting than the Canadian border. But what happens to your mental state when you're approaching that customs area, Doug?
Sorry, I had myself muted.
Oh, you're muted.
Well, you definitely want to be aware of what is allowed or not allowed when you're crossing that border. A lot of people get themselves in trouble because there's something in their bags that they forgot they put there, or they're bringing home a souvenir, or they picked up something in one country and they're just going across the border to another country. They're still on the same trip, but not realizing that something they picked up somewhere isn't allowed in that area you're moving into. And so that's one thing you really need to be aware of, as well as, the security measures. You're going to see different levels of security at different borders, and how those officials react to perceived threats is going to be different, at different borders as well. So you got to be careful and know what you're doing before you get there.
Yeah, I was actually paying attention to this as we approached the border, and the Canadian border is probably the easiest border crossing you'll ever have. But as we were approaching that, even like 20 miles out, I knew we were coming up on that. I physically felt my heart rate start to increase. I wasn't doing anything illegal. I wasn't, trying to smuggle anything through. There shouldn't have been any issues whatsoever. But my body reacted to what was coming up, and in response to that, I told the kids when we were about 5 minutes out, okay, everybody wake up, sit up, smile, don't say anything dumb. Don't talk unless you're asked a question. And asked my wife for the 10th time, do you have the passports? You got everything there ready? And it's kind of, at these border crossings, it's kind of like the soup Nazi, right? The version of on Seinfeld where you got to do everything right, and if you do, you get through really easy. And that's exactly how it worked. We pulled up. They said, where are you headed? Had the answer ready. How long are you going to be there? Okay. They said, let's see your passports. Handed over the stack of all the passports. They scanned those in and said, have a nice day. Just like that. Simple. But I was at peak of awareness, and I ensured that the rest of my family was at their peak of awareness as well. Well, we went on this long trip, and we had about 2,000 miles under our belt, and we got to the second border crossing to come back into the States. And by this time, I'm fatigued. I'm tired. I've had my awareness level up so high because I'm in new territory, driving in unfamiliar areas, and I had to figure out how many kilometers per hour am I driving, and so it was different, and my awareness was up. But by 2,000 miles in, or 3,000 kilometers in, I got to this second border crossing, and I was not at the same level of awareness as I was otherwise. And so as we went through the border crossing, they asked me the questions. You got any guns? You got any contraband, marijuana, or fruit, or anything like that? And I said, nope, we're good. And they scanned our passports and sent us on our way. And we got about 10 miles down the road. And my wife looked down in the center console, started moving something, and here's an apple. I smuggled contraband into this country, and it was totally I wasn't at the peak of my game. I hadn't thought about those things. So situational awareness is something that we have to manage. And it can be affected by our level of fatigue. It can be affected by the time of day, and all of these things that go into that. And so we've got to be aware of that. Okay, so situational awareness. We need to practice this in everything that we do, even if it's in the office. You would be surprised how many simple office accidents that we see come in as workers' compensation claims each year, where somebody gets their feet tangled up in cords underneath their desk, and they fall out of their chair when they try to stand up. So just a FYI on the side there, look under your desk right now. If you got any extra cables hanging around there, get those things tied up. Get them put up out of the way so we don't have that. Practice situational awareness in everything that we do. Technology, we have the most information of any generation in all time, and yet we're less aware of our overall surroundings than we've ever been. And so that's another reason why situational awareness has to be something that we work on, because that phone, even though it has tons of information, can take our mind away from those important things. And as we're walking through the parking lot, maybe somebody grabs our wallet, or accosts us in some way. Those are or something as simple as we trip and fall on a curb. Okay. So 3 elements of situational awareness. One is perception of the elements in current situation. That's cognition. Pay attention to what is going on. Identify what all of the elements are in our environment. Do they all matter? No. But we sort those things out and say, hey, it's a bright sunny day. I don't have to worry as much about tripping and falling as if it's dark and I don't have a flashlight. Comprehension of current situation. We call that judgment. What do all of the factors that I'm reading mean to me at this point? It may mean nothing. It may be something of a little bit of import, or it might be something of great importance. I'm walking through a dark parking lot and I see somebody kind of shadowing me walking through the parking lot. Well, that's probably of high importance to me, and I've got to make some judgment around that. And then the last step is projection of future status. What does it mean to me? What do I expect to come from this, and what actions do I need to take to avoid a hazard that may be coming, or put myself in the best possible situation? All right. So there are kind of some steps that we say. What is it? So what? And now what? these are the steps. So what does this piece of information, the person that's shadowing me in the parking lot, so what? Well, so what, this guy may jump me and take my money or hurt me. Well, now what? Well, then that's the question. Where do I go from there? Can I safely get in my vehicle and exit this space, or do I need to return back to the building, or do I make a phone call to 911? So let's have you do a quick quiz. Everybody out there, close your eyes, and we're all going to watch Doug and see if he closes his eyes. All right, he closed his eyes. Close your eyes and point to the nearest garbage can. All right. Open your eyes and see if the other people in the room are pointing at the same one or the closest one. Let's do the same thing again. Point to the nearest exit with your eyes closed. Okay? Point to the nearest fire extinguisher. Okay? Point to the nearest first aid kit. Point to the nearest hazard or risk or threat to you. All right? I'll point to you too, Doug. All right, everybody can open your eyes, and we'll move on there. But ask yourself these questions. Now, these are some pretty simple ones, but are we aware of what's going on? If we're in a new environment, we're probably more aware than we are in a familiar environment, just because it's new to us. Okay, let's go through some examples of situational awareness in doing different tasks. So, felling a tree. So Doug was a lumberjack at one point in his career, and so he felled some trees. He cut down trees up in the Pacific Northwest. Did you wear red flannel when you were out cutting trees down?
Well, sometimes I would wear a flannel shirt. It was cold in the morning when we head out. I don't know about red. I don't remember.
All right. You sleep all night and you worked all day. I'm just wondering how many people get that. So
sounds familiar.
Yeah. So tell me, situational awareness around cutting a tree down. You come up and you approach this mighty spruce, and you're going to take the tree down. What kind of things?
Mighty Douglas fir.
Douglas fir.
You're going to size up the tree. You're going to look to see how the tree's balanced. You're going to take into account the slope that you're on. You're going to be looking at the weather conditions, especially if it's windy, or if the ground is soft or muddy. You're going to be looking at the trees that are in the surrounding area. Do you have any potential windfall or snags, where those may come down on top of you besides the tree you're dropping itself? There's a lot of conditions that you need to be taking into consideration before you start to make that cut, to determine how you're going to cut it and keep yourself as safe as possible, not just from that tree, but from the environment around you.
Absolutely. Great input there. Looking for an exit route. I mean, we just had you point out, where's the nearest exit? Well, you're out in the woods. What are you talking about, an exit route? Well, if that tree decides to blow apart when you get halfway through it, what do you have a clear route? Does that mean we go out and we clean up some of the rubbish and down branches around us before we cut that tree down? Probably. So what do we need to be aware of? There's a lot of things. I thought this was a really interesting example because the U.S. Forest Service actually trains people out cutting trees on situational awareness. I ran into a couple of these guys way back in the Wind River's wilderness. We were probably 20 miles back in backpacking, and we ran into these two guys, and they're walking along with a crosscut saw on their shoulder and an axe. And these guys would go for a week plus at a time cutting trees and just basically clearing the trails to keep those open in the wilderness areas. And I got to thinking about that's a risky job. Not only are you out of contact with people, you don't have cell service or anything like that way back in the wilderness, but you're doing really hazardous tasks. And so the Forest Service teaches about all these things that Doug talked about, as well as things like fatigue and the caloric intake. How much food have you had to eat today prior to doing this? What does that mean to your ability to assess hazards and risks? Well, probably quite a bit. If you haven't had anything to eat for a full day, your ability to have your brain process information is diminished. And the last tree you cut in the day is probably more risky than the first tree. Anyway, most of us aren't cutting trees on a regular basis, but it's a good example of what we should be processing for. We can take that into our own world, because most of us mow the lawn. Maybe not quite the same hazard as felling a tree, but it could be really similar. Ask yourself the question, have you ever run over something on the lawn with your lawnmower? Kids left a toy out there, or the sprinkler or something like that, and you hear that where your mower hits that. What does that tell us? Well, I probably was not aware of my environment. I didn't take the time to identify any of those hazards that are there and mitigate those. Other things, law enforcement. You think about doing a stop, a traffic stop in the middle of the night. Is that risky? Well, they talk about law enforcement and they say it's 99% boredom and 1% pure terror. You have to ask yourself, what information is important when it comes to a traffic stop? There's lots of information to gather besides just what type of car and what's the license number. What are the people in the vehicle doing? Where are their hands? Are they acting erratic? What does their voice sound like? What type of language are they using? All of these things are information that we process in our situational awareness. Well, most of us aren't in law enforcement, but any interaction that we have with the public or with coworkers can use the same things. We want to assess what those risks potentially could be as somebody comes in. If it's the guy in the subway and he starts using vulgar language, well, that probably is a hint, because most people don't use that type of language in regular conversation in public. Well, I need to heighten my awareness, and I need to make a plan in case this goes south. Unfortunately, we've had some really sad events that happened over the weekend that just highlight that situational awareness. A public space and a bad guy comes in and starts shooting. All right. And what do we do with that information once we get it? That's the important step. Driving is a simple task that many of us do that highlights our need for situational awareness. I asked about who are the scariest drivers. In my opinion, the clueless drivers are probably more of a risk, more of a hazard to me and you out on the road than the aggressive drivers. Now, I don't like aggressive driving, but many aggressive drivers are at least paying attention to what's going on. The clueless drivers with the earbuds in their ears and staring straight forward, those drivers scare me a lot. So situational awareness techniques for driving would be those simple things like practicing what-if scenarios. What if this guy comes over into my lane? What if that kid is not nearly as good at riding a bicycle as he ought to be out here on the freeway? Give yourself an out. Those techniques of, as we travel down the road, putting yourself in a position that if somebody else makes a dumb decision, you're in a safe, putting yourself in a safe scenario where you've got an out, an escape plan. Okay. Cybersecurity. You say, what the heck are you talking about cybersecurity on a situational awareness webinar? Well, cyber risks are risks, and they can put us in some really bad situations. Many of you have probably had spear phishing scams come in through your email. They are rampant. I've received multiples of these, and I even responded to one day, not actually giving money or anything, but I saw an email. An email came in. I was just walking into an appointment, and an email came in from Steve Hansen, our CEO. It said, "Are you available? I need to talk." And I was just going into an appointment, so I responded, "I'm just walking into an appointment. I will call you when I get out." So I got out of my appointment, and I called up Steve, and I said, "What was it you needed?" And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't contact you." And I went back and I looked at my email and looked at the email address that was in there. It said Steve Hansen, but when I hovered over the email address, that wasn't his email. It was a spear phishing attempt, and I bit, and I felt dumb about that, but it was just one of those quick things. Oh, okay, I'm in a hurry. But the next response from that is the person trying to get me to do something to compromise my either data or to give them money. And so our awareness in our digital environment is just as important as the physical environment. Okay? So ask yourself, what are your risks? Ask yourself when a request comes in, why is my boss asking me to wire him money or buy gift cards or something like that? That's where we can see that, hey, there's a problem here, and we want to check further before we take action and respond to these types of requests. All right. Where and when of situational awareness? We can't be on 100% alert all the time because because our brain will wear out. We'll have overload and will wear out. So how do we turn it on and off? There are some situations, if you're in your lazy boy at home, our situational awareness can be way down. But other places we'll need to turn that up. How do we go about doing it? One is to build this as part of a process that we go through wherever we are. And it's hard to build that process, and so we have to intentionally do it to start with to make it part of our day. And to do that, we have some sort of a trigger. One of the challenges I'll give you today is to take a 24-hour situational awareness test. A lot of times we get done with a webinar and it's like, okay, on with my day, and I don't think about it again. Well, today do something different. I have been remodeling a home, and I happen to have a carpenter's pencil, one of those odd-shaped pencils, and I thought that's just odd. I put that in my pocket, and every time I reach in my pocket, that's a reminder. Check your situational awareness. There's also things that you can do, like putting a reminder on your phone that every hour it'll pop up and say, check your situational awareness. And if you do something repeatedly for an amount of time, if you do that for a 24-hour period, that's going to help you make this a part of your everyday. And I guarantee you're going to identify some hazards. You're going to identify some things about your environment that you should be aware of and take some action there. Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm going to jump. So practice your situational awareness out on the road, in the parking lot, in your office, and do that one-day situational awareness drill. Use a trigger, carry something with you, or something that will trigger your mind to go, oh, situational awareness drill. Okay. All right. And so just a challenge for you today. I recommend you go out and identify a hazard today and fix it if you can. If you can't, report that to your supervisor and warn others about this hazard. Make situational awareness a part of your everyday function. It's a process that you go through. When you walk into a new room, you look around and say, where am I? What are my risks? Where's my exit? Whatever that may be. And work together to build these programs and make those work well. All right. In summary, situational awareness is important. We need to be asking, what if? What are the risks? What does it mean to me? And what am I going to do about it? Pay attention to what the details are. And remind your coworkers, you see somebody that's not being very aware, help them to understand what the risks may be and help them to build this as part of their job. You're out working the street and around traffic. This should be a regular thing. Don't get your head down working on a job and forget about that traffic or forget about the backhoe driving around. We have to keep that awareness up. Take action when you find a hazard, because somebody else may not have the situational awareness that you do. Folks, thank you very much for your time today, and I apologize I went a little long on this one. I kind of like this subject, and I ended up a little longer than I intended. Please, if you have any questions or comments, type those into the chat box or the Q&A box. Debbie says we should do a bit of workplace exam at the beginning of the day, see if we spy some potential risk, then continue during the day as things change. Absolutely. Look at your situation on a regular basis. As we walk through your facilities and do risk assessments, we'll point something out, and the response from people is, "Huh, I'm here every day, and I didn't notice that." And it's not necessarily that they're clueless. We get back to that normalcy bias. We get used to what we're doing, and we get complacent. And that's why we should kick ourselves just a little bit to make this a part of what we're doing. Thank you so much for taking time to remind us how comfortable we can get and how dangerous it can be. Absolutely. That's why we do these things. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions, and we're a little long, and Doug's got to get his presentation coming up here, so I'm going to wrap it up right now. If you have not signed up for the trenching webinar and would like to attend, send me an email right now to jason@utahtrust.gov, and I will send you a link right away, and we'll get you into that. Thanks so much, folks. Be safe out there, and we'll talk to you again real soon.